Wight County Press. Numerous events to bring you in the main arena throughout the afternoon. And we're getting underway now with our next arena event, which is a parade of some of our fine old vintage steam vehicles that are with us at Table Street this weekend, including one vehicle that attended our very first steam show back in 1975. Now, our first vehicle, which is well into the arena, well, we've just seen it performing in the driving tests. It's owned and driven by Shane Arnold, who's owned the vehicle for about 7 or 8 years. The 1923 Wallace & Stevens single-cylinder 5-horsepower engine. Originally supplied new to Heston and Isleworth Urban District Council, where it was on general road-making duties. Back in the 1920s and 30s, these sorts of vehicles were in regular use, rolling out the hardcore bases for roads and rolling out the surface. It always travels under its own steam to events on the island and around the south. So 1923 Wallace & Stevens single-cylinder 5-horsepower steamroller owned by Shane Arnold from Newport. Already well into the arena is the other vehicle we saw on the driving tests, 1931 Foden G-type 3-way tipper. This owned by Graham Axrell from Arreton on the island. The wagon has a road speed of approximately 20 miles per hour and a carrying capacity of 6 tons. I referred to it at the beginning as a 3-way tipper. The carrying body back of the wagon is capable of being tipped in 3 directions, either towards the back or to either side. 1931 Foden C-type 3-way tipper owned by Graham Axrell from Arreton. It's a Super Sentinel steam lorry. It's owned by HMS Sultan from Gosport, owned by the Naval School of Engineering. It's a 1930 Super Sentinel steam lorry. The 1930 Super Sentinel steam lorry, just coming along the lower side of the arena, was originally operated from new by Brown & Co. in Suffolk for carrying flour, then sold to Lamberts of Kent and converted for transporting gravel in 1937. In 1953, the wagon was purchased by Hardwicks of Surrey for carriage of scrap metal, although never actually put to use. However, in 1956, it was ready for use during the Suez crisis, but was discovered to be uneconomical. 2 diesel lorries could still be run for less cost. In 1957, it was purchased by Wingham Engineering in Kent and loaned permanently to HMS Sultan in 1960. From then, it was regularly seen on the roads through the summer season, attending rallies and carnivals, fetes and charity events within roughly an 80-mile radius of Gosport. The wagon was finally purchased by HMS Sultan in 1970, and it's maintained by a small group of enthusiastic volunteers. It's a 1930 Super Sentinel steam lorry owned by the Naval School of Engineering, HMS Sultan in Gosport. The steam lorry just going around the far end of the arena. Number 9 is now just about to making its way along the lower side of the arena, originally supplied new to Percy Blake of Bryston on the Isle of Wight, and at the time had the name Vectis, which is the Roman name for the Isle of Wight. It spent all of its working life on the island. It was used during its latter years to drive a stone crusher at Lynn Quarry, which is now the site of the council rubbish tip. was probably last steamed during or soon after the last World War, stayed in the quarry until purchased by John Goulding during the early 60s, and it was then pushed by an Orkin traction engine to a site just behind a nightclub on the Dubber at Seaview. Present owners purchased it in 1978 in a derelict condition. The remains of the firebox had patches. Much of the brasswork and fittings have been removed, but it was dismantled and inspected, and the boiler was found to be sound and so capable of restoration. It's a Wallace & Stevens expansion traction engine, an agricultural engine, built in 1909 and restored and driven today by its owner Ken Honeybun from Lymington in Hampshire. Wallace & Stevens agricultural engine just making its way along the top side of the arena. To the bright green agricultural engine just coming into the arena. 6 horsepower engine built by Aveling and Porter and owned and driven by John Attrell from Wroxall on the Isle of Wight. It's named Elizabeth. This engine was acquired by the present owner 21 years ago from Lincolnshire. Restoration took place over the next 4 years, and much of the machinery and much of the engine was renewed. 1898 Aveling and Porter 6 horsepower agricultural engine. The vehicle resplendent in Lincoln green with John Attrell at the controls with a feather in his cap. He's from Wroxall here on the island. Closely following John. Well, I mentioned earlier on that just one steam vehicle is here today. That was also at our very first Island Steam Show back in 1975. At that time we simply had a 2-day event on the Saturday and Sunday of the bank holiday weekend, and we only had 3 steam vehicles in total. Well, this steamroller just coming along the lower side of the arena was one of those 3 vehicles that attended our very first show. That we quickly thrown between reverse and forward gear. It was originally supplied new in 1927 to Shanklin Urban District Council, where it spent the whole of its working life here on the island on road making duties. It was then bought and used by Westridge Construction Company in the 1950s and then passed into the Norman Ball Transport Collection. It was acquired by Peter Taylor in 1992, since when extensive work has been carried out, including retubing and a new smoke box and repainting its original brown livery. The 1927 Wallace & Stevens 10-ton advanced steamroller just making its way along the upper side of the arena, owned by Peter Taylor from Ryde here on the island. Good to see it. A large number of this particular type of steam tractor were built around the turn of the century, used for short haul journeys of furniture, fruit, veg, post, parcels and so on. By the early 1900s, the law was changed in favour of the 5-ton tractor, displacing the 3-tonners, most of which were scrapped or converted to small road rollers. Just coming towards the upper side of the arena, a 1980 Foreman 3-ton steam tractor owned by Andy Selwood from Cotton, Newport on the island. Originally supplied to Buncombe's of Highbridge in Somerset, who purchased all 3 rollers built by Babcock's. Last used by Buncombe's to roll the approach road to Hinckley Power Station, then sold on to a farmer in Kent, who gave it to his son as a present. The engine is called Brutus. It's owned by Alan Sloper from Newport, one of only 3 12-ton rollers built by Babcock's and Wilcox. 12-ton road roller built in 1926, just making its way along the lower side of the arena. Slightly different looking vehicle also along the lower side of the arena. It's a Showman's tractor. To Showman specifications. 1917 Garrett Showman's tractor. That was the sort of vehicle regularly used in Showland for hauling fairground rides from town to town around the country. It's owned by Don Cully from Netley Marsh in Hampshire. Ownership was actually transferred on our showground here at Haven Street at our 1995 Island Steam Show. A regular visitor to Haven Street, it's a 6-horsepower Marshall traction engine built in 1909, owned and driven today by Mrs. Constance Jenkins from Ryde. Creeping along the bottom side of the arena is a traction engine named Charlie B in honour of its maker Charles Burrell. The Burrell agricultural engine built in 1916, now owned by Don Cully from Netley Marsh. Originally supplied to a Cheshire farmer, and it spent its working life on the farm. This particular type of vehicle, being an agricultural traction engine, was the forerunner of the modern-day tractor. It was also used to power many farm machines such as threshing boxes, saw benches, stone crushers, 135 pounds. Acquired by the present owner in 1976, and he's owned it ever since. A lot of work has been undertaken on the vehicle over the years. Good to see it here at 7-horsepower general purpose engine. Again, the sort of vehicle that would be used for driving all sorts of industrial and agricultural machinery, also for haulage duties. Engine spent all of its working life in Norfolk for a Mr. Dawes of Mileham, where it wore out 2 sets of gearing and 2 sets of wheel strakes. Purchased by the current owner, John Antle, in 1964 in running order, but since has undergone a lot of restoration and rebuilding work. 7-horsepower general purpose engine built in 1908. Fowler engine, now owned and driven today by John Antle from Shillingston in Dorset. Who undertook some quite heroic feats of heavy haulage during the 1920s and 30s. Just going round at the top side of the arena, owned and driven today by Alan and Jean Wight from Sentinel, Dorset, 4-inch scale road loco. Treads backwards again this year. Just coming along the lower side of the arena, Michael's from Sandown on the island. This vehicle, named Reliable, was originally supplied new in 1914 to Perryman Brothers in Shackford in Devon. 2 years later it was sold to Edison's of Dorchester, and Edison's of Dorchester had quite a fleet of steam vehicles, steam robbers and so on. They later sold it on to Devon County Council, who used the engine in its also exactly as a full-size engine. The boiler steams at 100 pounds per square inch, and it was built in collaboration with Dennis Ramsden, who's bringing in the neck. Another miniature just made its way along the lower side of the arena, coming up in front of the commentary position. Built between 1992 and 94 by owner and driver Brian Smith from Ryde on the island. Built by him over a 2-year period using drawings and rough castings supplied by LSM Engineering of Derby. It's a 4-inch scale model of a 6 horsepower Foster traction engine, owned and driven by Brian Smith.